architecture, the proportions are not always the proportion and the things themselves. Often the proportion between the things. There's nothing, but still there is a proportion.
Les presento a uno de los arquitectos más influyentes e icónicos del siglo XX. Ludwig mies van der Rohe nació en 1886 en Alemania. Mies van der Rohe dejó una huella indeleble en el mundo de la arquitectura y el diseño. Su enfoque distintivo en la simplicidad, la elegancia y la pureza en el diseño lo convirtió en un referente del movimiento modernista y le otorgó un lugar destacado en la historia de la arquitectura. En 1938, Miesman emigró a los Estados Unidos debido a las crecientes tensiones políticas en Europa. Se estableció en Chicago, donde desempeñaría un papel fundamental en la arquitectura moderna.
El estilo de mies van der Rohe se caracteriza por su mantra, menos es más. Abogó por la simplicidad y la funcionalidad en sus diseños. Eliminó elementos ornamentales innecesarios y buscó la pureza de líneas y la claridad en sus estructuras. Su uso innovador del acero y el vidrio permitió la creación de espacios abiertos y luminosos. Esto se convirtió en un sello distintivo de su obra. Mies van der Rohe tenía un profundo respeto por la materialidad. Utilizó materiales como el mármol, travertino y el vidrio para destacar la honestidad de la estructura y los materiales en sus edificios.
Uno de sus trabajos más icónicos es el Pabellón de Barcelona, diseñado para la Exposición Internacional de 1929. Este edificio es un ejemplo perfecto de su estilo con su famoso sillón Barcelona. La Casa Farnsworth, diseñada en 1951, es otro ejemplo destacado de su enfoque minimalista. Esta casa de vidrio y acero se integran de manera armoniosa con la naturaleza circundante. El rascacielos Seagram Building en Nueva York, construido en 1958, es un hito en la arquitectura moderna y muestra su maestría en el uso del acero y el vidrio. Otro edificio emblemático es el Crewon Hall, parte del Instituto de Tecnología de Illinois. Su diseño revolucionario lo convierte en un espacio flexible y luminoso.
Pabellón de Barcelona. El Pabellón de Barcelona sin duda es la obra más icónica de este arquitecto, por eso la mencionamos dos veces. El Pabellón de Barcelona, diseñada por mies van der Rohe para la Exposición Internacional de Barcelona en 1929, es un hito arquitectónico. Su arquitectura se caracteriza por la simplicidad y la apertura espacial. Los materiales nobles como el mármol, travertino, el vidrio y el acero cromado se utilizan de manera magistral. El interior es fluido y sin paredes tradicionales. Con el icónico Sillón de Barcelona como parte integral, este edificio se ha convertido en un icono de la arquitectura moderna y continúa inspirando a diseñadores y arquitectos de todo el mundo. Mies van buscaba crear una sensación de fluidez y transparencia en contraste con la arquitectura más pesada de la época. El diseño influye en dos pabellones principales, el pabellón alemán y el pabellón de arte moderno, rodeados por un estanque. Mies van der Rohe vivió y trabajó en una época de transformaciones en la arquitectura. Esta época, que abarcó desde el principio del siglo XX hasta mediados del siglo, se conoce como la era de la arquitectura moderna. Durante este periodo, los arquitectos buscaban romper con las convenciones tradicionales y adoptar un enfoque más funcional. Mies van der Rohe abogó por la simplicidad, la transparencia y la honestidad estructural en sus diseños. Eliminó elementos ornamentales innecesarios y utilizó materiales como el vidrio, el acero de manera innovadora. Su influencia en la arquitectura moderna sigue siendo relevante y su legado perdura a través de sus obras icónicas.
En resumen, mies van der Rohe fue un arquitecto visionario cuyo estilo de arquitectura enfocado en la simplicidad, la funcionalidad y la materialidad dejó una huella duradera en la arquitectura moderna. Su enfoque en la materialidad, la estructura y la simplicidad definió una era en la arquitectura moderna.
A sort of second Rockefeller Center and decided to move to Midtown Manhattan. Doubtless many of the other similar institutions would have followed, and that would have been a very serious blow to Lower Manhattan.
As one of the architects of Rockefeller Center, Wallace Harrison continues to pioneer the big city center with buildings on Mellon Square in Pittsburgh and the United Nations Center in New York.
What we need in America are more centers like this center in New York. Centers where people can live and enjoy life as they are able to work together here under pleasant conditions with attractive surroundings. Every center must start with an idea. In the United Nations, we had the idea of building a center for possible world peace. Years ago, when Rockefeller Center was built, the idea was to build a center for better business efficiency. Today, we must build centers for the needs of the children, the needs of the older people, of whom we ought to have so many in the future. Generally, such centers will need a common open space with the peace and security that we used to have in the old village greens of New England.
These old-fashioned architectural values were brought to the service of modern industry by Eero Saarinen in his design for the 80-acre General Motors Technical Center.
We really had here an opportunity to create a total environment. It was all the buildings, all the landscaping, everything together. Here was the technical center for a great metal-producing corporation that mass produces precision metal. Somehow the character of that should get into the architecture. Therefore, the very strict lines, the sharpness, the precision, and all that. Beyond that, created a human, campus-like environment, which was the best possible place for all this research and development to go on. These very stairways, like this one, is really a piece of sculpture in itself. We have to remember that architecture is not just here to give space and shelter for man, but architecture also has the purpose of marking and enhancing man's time on Earth.
Architects design new centers for industry, but can the industrial process, the new flow of techniques and services, help the architect in designing new homes for man? The question is raised by architect Vernon DeMars out of a long experience with mass housing.
I think the American supermarket illustrates the American genius for mass production as well as anything else. Canned goods lined up on the shelves, all quite uniform. This is the way we produce housing, too. So we have Mr. and Mrs. Jones, ex-GI, buying a little house right here on the shelf with all the rest of the canned goods. I think we're victims of the production capacity that we have developed, this tendency toward homogeneity, which appraisers and bankers think is so valuable to ensure the value of a property is greatly overrated. And I think that we've got to find some way of building communities, not merely collections of houses. Here at Easter Hill, we attempted to introduce a certain kind of chaos from the very beginning, so that almost anything that people would do from then on couldn't hurt it any further. John Hardis and I were pretty worried about those 2,500 boulders we found here on the site, but they really gave us less trouble than we had expected. They were used functionally here, cheap way to get retaining walls and that thing. Many of the principles that we experimented with here could be applied in tract development. If you have some variety in sizes of buildings, in the types of ownership, rental facilities, there will be a constant rejuvenation of this kind of a community, and it will have within itself the possibility of its own regeneration and continuance.
The city is where most architecture happens. A city grows or it dies. Architecturally, the city is an event that continues to happen. If ever that event comes to an end, the city will disappear. The future of our American cities is one of the great challenges and opportunities of our generation. The relationship of the city to its suburbs, of its present inhabitants to its new population, of its people to its machines. These are some of the relationships, always changing, that must be kept fluid and creative if the city is to be the mark of our urban civilization. Is there an architectural solution to some of these conflicts? Victor Gruen believes there is in his plan for the city of Fort Worth.
You know, I'm getting a little bit dizzy here, looking down from Fort Worth, newest and highest building. I'm watching that woman over there in that yellow car. She's driving around the department store already for the third time trying to find the parking lot. And look at her crossing the street. She's going to be killed. No, she got away with it. We must discontinue this unusable pattern of mixing automobiles and people, this melee of machines and flesh. How are we going to do it? Looking around us in all directions, we see the metropolitan area. You know, this highway network could be compared with a river system in nature. If we want to find the solution, we have to create something similar to the ocean of nature. And that is one part of the Fort Worth plan. Right around this downtown area, we're going to have a belt highway fitting snugly around the compact business area. Inside of that highway will be the parallel to the ocean, a large collecting basin for automobiles. There will be 6 garages with a capacity of together 60,000 cars. Inside that belt highway will be an area reserved for pedestrians only, the new downtown pedestrian area of Fort Worth. Within the garages, moving sidewalks and escalators will bring the Fort Worthian citizens down to the nearest entrance towards the city. From there, they will walk 2.5 minutes to the very middle of the town. And they will walk in an environment very different from the one which we see today, with landscaped malls and courts, fountains, and sculpture. Some areas covered over completely, maybe air-conditioned malls like in South Bay in Minneapolis. Am I talking about a dream? It may sound like one, but in the case of Fort Worth, it will become reality, because the citizens of Fort Worth want it. One of them is Mr. G.B. Thomas, president of the Texas Electric Company and one of the members of the Greater Fort Worth Planning Committee.
Thank you, Victor. It may be, as Mr. Gruen says, that there is much of a dream in this plan for Fort Worth. We who sit in chairs of responsibility in Fort Worth want to add all that we can to be sure that the Gruen plan is soundly carried through and gives us indeed a Greater Fort Worth tomorrow.
In Philadelphia, the concern of another businessman for his city has brought him into the municipal government itself. For some time, Albert M. Greenfield was chairman of the City Planning Commission, for which Edmund Bacon is the executive director.
Mr. Bacon is my collaborator in this activity we now call herbiculture. It is a new word, because planning is a comparatively new science, new art. And therefore, you may not find that word in the dictionary, but it's a good word, herbiculture.
is keynoted in the Greenway principle, which has been developed under Mr. Baker's direction.
This model of panorama shows on one side the way the city now is, and as the panels revolve, the way it's going to be after the plans are carried out. Actually, what we are doing is to plan the city for the days when our children are the men and women of Philadelphia. The Greenway principle is the idea of an organized system of public open spaces, designed as a series of walkways for movement into the heart of the community. The way obviously must be found to relate the new work of different architects for different clients with each other and with the historic survivals in this area in the form of old institutions and landmarks.
The mall is now probably 75% complete, and we hope will be entirely completed in the next few years. Independence Hall is the finest shrine that America has, in fact, the supreme shrine of the Western world. Must be saved, must be renovated and restored for its proper use and purpose.
In order to achieve this purpose, the architects must attune themselves to the responsibility of designing a part of a larger area. As this principle becomes more widely practiced, then the profession of architecture will begin to assume its proper role in the rebuilding of American city. And we will leave to our children and our children's children a heritage worthy of our generation.
As members of that generation, we are more than economists, architects, builders, clients. We are members of a community responsible to one another into the future. In this film, we have taken a look at architecture, at its roots in aesthetics and technology, at its buildings and their environment, and finally at the city. We have looked into the future to forecast the great volume of building that will go up in this country during the next 10 years. But doesn't our discussion point to something beyond aesthetics and beyond technology, beyond economics?
One answer came from Henry R. Luce, editor-in-chief of Time Incorporated, when he spoke at the centennial celebration of the American Institute of Architects in Washington, D.C. Looking to the future, Mr. Luce said,
My argument and prophecy is this. For 200 years, the American people have been faithful to one dominant purpose, namely to the establishment of a form of government. That purpose has now been fulfilled, and we are at present seized by a broader challenge, namely the shaping of a civilization. We will meet that broader challenge. We will succeed in creating the first modern, technological, humane, prosperous, and reverent civilization. This creative response to challenge will be most vividly expressed in and by architecture.